right. Hello, risers, and welcome to another episode of the Rising with Christian podcast. I am just praying that you are rising in your week, in your emotions, in your life. And I have a very dear friend joining us today by the name of Reverend Dr. Dominique A. Robinson. Can we please welcome her? Welcome, sister, to the platform.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I am happy that you are here and y'all know that I'm in ministry, but she is someone that I definitely look up to. I learned so much about. She is a great preacher. I'm just going to read her bio. Dominique A. Robinson is a New Jersey native. She is well educated. She has a Bachelor's of Arts from Georgetown University, a Master of Theology from Candler School of Theology, a D-Min from Columbia Theological Seminary, and she is currently a PhD student at Christian Theological Seminary. My gosh, you are educated, girl.
As Black women, we feel like, well, sometimes we feel like we have to be overqualified, overeducated just to get the
Listen.
entry point. So,
Listen, and it doesn't end there, okay? Because you are also the new John Hines Assistant Professor preaching at the Seminary of the Southwest in Austin, Texas. And you are also the former inaugural Dean of Chapel Assistant Professor of Religion at Wiley College. My goodness, y'all, can we just please just clap it up for all that she's doing for the kingdom? Welcome again.
thank you.
Awesome. So I wanted to bring on Reverend Dr. Robinson for a session where we're talking about growing your faith, overcoming tough seasons in your life, and where does God play in religion, church, community play in that. So I know that I just read all of your scholastic endeavors, but talk about the inception. I know you accepted your call at 13. How did that unravel? I am so curious.
I grew up in a way where I know we're talking about stormy seasons and
Mhm.
overcoming. And the truth is, I feel like I was born into a stormy season, and grew up within various stormy seasons. So my mother had me at a very young age, and so her mom. And at the time, I'm also going to say my dad's mom, though he's not my biological dad, he's the only dad that I knew as a child. He married my mom while she was pregnant with me. As a matter of fact, he actually gave up everything to go take care of her and be her
Wow.
husband and things of that nature. So his mom was the pastor of the church that I grew up in. So his mom and my biological maternal grandmother were the two women who really raised me. They thought that my mom was too young to raise me. And so I spent my weeks between their two houses. Interestingly enough, both of my grandmothers, or I should say both of my parents, are one of 10. So huge families on both sides. My mother's mother was a devout Baptist woman who at the time did not necessarily believe in women in ministry, while my
Mhm.
dad's mom was the founding pastor of this Pentecostal church who the Lord shall pour out the Lord's spirit on all flesh, both men and women, and boys and girls. The sons will prophesy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I grew up in those two kind of spectrums of faith development. My mother's mother was very devout. Like she was praying all the time, like Mahalia Jackson playing all the time, all that jazz. And
Mhm.
while she never, I would say, encouraged me to preach, so to speak, she certainly encouraged spiritual disciplines very early on. We start with, grace and praying before you go to bed and moments like that. But because I would always be able to observe her between watching her stories, Young and the Restless and Little Victor Newman and The Price is Right and God in Light, for all the seasoned saints on the line, y'all know what we talking about
Yes.
right now. That, and like I said, playing Mahalia Jackson, she was the kind of typical housewife, cooked and cleaned. She was the type of grandmother, a woman, I should say, who I don't think my grandfather ever saw her undone. I know that sounds ridiculous. Like when I
Wow.
was home during the day with her, she would be in her rollers and her muumuu. But when my grandfather would come home for lunch, she would be like dressed, like boom, dressed for cooked meal, all that jazz. While my dad's mom, found in this church, she was in the streets. I mean, you could find her talking to the drunk men on the corner, and growing up in Newark, New Jersey, the crackheads out in the fields or in the abandoned lots and homes. And so I watched these two women live out their faith in a very different way. And so I think, not think, I know that I was introduced to God through a feminine voice. And so I literally always thought God was this big black woman in the kitchen cooking.
Wow.
Had nothing on me. I already thought that. I thought that was the way. I thought that was normal. I thought everybody thought God was a black woman. Like, hello, what are y'all talking about? So that's how I was introduced to God in that way, watching these two women raise their families, be present for their grandchildren in ways that my parents and my aunts and uncles couldn't be present. Two women who didn't have quote unquote secular jobs, that used all their resources. I'm talking about great pots of, great northern beans and, making it last for large families, families coming over to eat on Sundays. I would go to Baptist church Sunday mornings and have dinner. And then I was in the Pentecostal service Sunday evenings until Monday mornings. And so that's how I was introduced to God, in that way, watching those two women. And more specifically, I think what helped shape me more was being in the Pentecostal church a heck of a lot. We had services. I felt like it was every day, all the time. And I remember being in tarrying services where I really only heard the women wailing and praying. So that for me was an introduction to how I commune with God, how I talk to God. While there were men in our service and like definitely men within the tradition, I really only saw the men at the door handling the money, uh, like assisting the women around moving, like kind of as like protectors and providers, but not the preachers. So I didn't really run into patriarchy in the church until I got older, and joined the AME Zion Church, where somebody basically told me I had too much confidence as a young preacher. But I'm sure that was rooted in seeing two women lead it in such a way. So that's how I was introduced to God, and that's how I started my ministry. I watched, like I said, I watched my aunts and uncles, and they were the choir, they were the ushers, they were everybody, and I had no choice. You got to jump in. It's a family church, so I ushered, which I was terrible at it. I did not have a spirit of hospitality. I sang. I sing. I shouldn't have been in the choir. I did praise dance, and you and I know that became a part of my identity now that I wish I can kind of get back to. But I was put up to preach at 13. And I just so happened to not fail, I guess, but I was put up to preach at 13. And I think while I accepted Christ in my life at 13 on my own, I think it has taken me years to evolve to accepting my ministry and call to preach.
Wow. I can relate to that. And being a preacher, being a woman preacher, being a young preacher, like there is so much sacrifice. Did you ever wrestle with what you had to give up? Now, there's a lot to gain, right? Answering the calling. But did you ever wrestle, especially at 13? I don't know if you formulated like, okay, this is what it's going to require being a preacher, or did you even like, okay, you say you're put up, like did you accept it? Were you preaching in your mirror at home? Like how did they know? And did you wrestle with like the sacrifice? Because I still wrestle at times, if I can be completely honest.
First of all, I definitely still wrestle. I don't even know. Wrestle sounds kind. I fight often still. And it's crazy that I fight it because, like, hello, Dominique, you teach preaching at a seminary. You preach as a traveling preacher. You're studying African American sacred rhetoric and preaching. I can't escape it, but I still fight every day. A lot of times, like literally, I still fight it. I don't even wrestling. I feel like I'm in.
What parts of it do you wrestle with? I'm
Um,
gonna see the parts I wrestle with.
Today, the parts that I wrestle with most probably are a result of grief, um,
Mm,
because I've been very angry with God, and I feel oftentimes in my anger or disappointment in God that being a representative of God is hypocritical. Because like I have no problem preaching, or not. No, I have no problem. It becomes a custom to offer hope and preach with celebration. And we've done such an amazing job of hiding how we really feel or performing that as preachers. And so I think my current day wrestling is with I don't want to do this because I don't feel it for myself. I don't want to study this because I have become my own research. My current research in this PhD program is I'm looking at how depression impacts our biblical interpretation. And
mm.
as I have wrestled with my own anxiety and depression after the loss of my godparents, I'm like, oh, I've become my research and I don't even want to read this. Like, I'm mad. But I know that it's probably exactly where I need to be able to offer the hope and the help that is needed for Black preachers who, like Elijah, can call fire down from heaven one day and 2 days later find themselves in a cave not wanting to do it and asking, did I do the right thing? So those are my current day wrestlings. I don't think I started to consider the sacrifices, Christian,
Mhm.
until I was in college. I think in high school, I didn't think enough of it. I think I just did whatever my grandmother told me to do. Um,
Mhm.
and because I have such a large family, I had cousins, so I didn't really need friends like that. And so I didn't really notice what I was not doing with friends because my cousins and I were doing the same thing. We were going to school. I
Mhm.
played after school sports, which I guess some of the wrestling was around that because in my Pentecostal church, we didn't wear pants or shorts, but I
Mhm.
wore shorts to play basketball. Right. And so I think maybe that might be the one thing that I might have noticed in, because at 13, I was still in kind of middle school, going into high school. But I didn't really notice the sacrifices because my life was surrounded around school and church, school and church. But when I got
Mhm.
to college, it was like, oh, wait, people have an expectation that I live differently, that I carry
Wow.
myself differently, that I speak differently. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't think I was willing to do that. Playing sports in college, navigating life in college,
Yeah.
navigating recreation, drugs, sex, parties. It's like
Yeah.
where you learn the boundary of what I'm not supposed to do versus what I am supposed to do. And nobody ever
Mhm.
talks about the balance of being quote unquote the cool Christian. And I don't mean cool like, oh, everybody wants to be like you, but
Exactly.
the balance
Exactly.
of you can live your life. You can put on a form-fitting dress, Dominique, and celebrate your body and your sensuality and your sexuality, and it does not take away from your Christianity or
Yes,
your belief,
Lord.
whatever. But nobody ever talks to us about that. So then I wrestle
No.
with, oh, I'm gonna have fun today, and then deep guilt and shame immediately
Mhm.
thereafter, and oh,
Mhm.
I gotta fast and pray and ask God to, forgive me. So nobody. So I think that's when I started to really wrestle with like, what are the sacrifices? It's I'm not going to the party. I'm not, and honestly, while those are sacrifices, I call them shallow sacrifices because the real sacrifices of doing this work are
Mhm.
are a little different, and a little deeper, more than where am I showing up or not showing up. It now for me, it's what's feeding my soul, what's feeding my spirit, what's coming through my ear gate and my eye gate. How I respond. Man, y'all heard I'm from Newark, New Jersey. The biggest struggle I have now is not cussing somebody out. I'd be like, oh,
Mhm. My husband, Matt, is from Newark. Baby, y'all are something else. Y'all
oh,
are
come here.
different
First of all, me and him, we
people. I go through Newark like it's just like its own little world. Like, what is happening?
battleground, and you're looking at the better part, okay?
Okay, but before we get to the resistance to act on, I relate because when I was also in college and I was leading Bible study every week and I was in front of the chapel making announcements every single day with the dean, I felt this wrestle of, oh my gosh, Christian, you did this, you going there, you wearing this, and then to go immediately from undergrad to working as a youth pastor at 22 and doing that for almost a decade. Every Sunday I'm working, and I worked for like 10 years straight. Every Sunday, vacations cut short, you Saturdays, what Saturday,
What Saturday
right?
night? What Thursday night? Thursday night's the last time you could. I've tried to have fun Thursday night because Friday I better start thinking about what I'm teaching or preaching.
And it's an ongoing cycle. What day off? You get a call, you get a text. So this is what people see. People see the pulpit. They see, you preaching this fiery sermon. They see you being called to pastor, but they don't understand the sacrifice that it takes. And there's someone that is watching today that have answered the sacrifice of their calling, of their profession, and people don't understand what it takes. So how do you still show up through the grief, through the
Mm.
pain, through the struggle?
Uh, Christian, you just hit on so many pieces, so many, so many, so many, so many pieces. It's like those sacrifices, like you said, that nobody sees and that you don't recognize are piling up until they hit you,
Mm,
until because you're almost burnt out because you didn't create time for self or care or anything like that. And so overcoming some of those challenges, which still occur today,
yeah.
especially now with like traveling and preaching, like, no, it's like, oh no, I usually am flying out by Friday. So I have to shift my week on where and how I take care of myself and balancing work and relationships and whatever else we're working through. I still do believe in weekly fasting and or so there's still
Mhm.
spiritual practices of okay, where am I going to do that? How does that look in public when I'm at work and this is a banquet, a dinner we're doing for everyone? And so am I going to shift my day of fasting so I don't compromise this
Mhm.
professional piece over here? Like all of those components and pieces. And something you mentioned, particularly around like standing in front of the chapel, making these
Yeah.
announcements with the same people we were with last night or the night before. And it's like, I know we say we don't worry about what people have to say, but if we're gonna be real, that stuff bothered me too, knowing
Mhm.
or wondering or concerned about what people would say, what they would put out there, what would become known. And that for me was scary, and sometimes still is now.
Yeah.
It still is scary. Who all gonna be there at dinner after church? Um, if I decide to order a margarita, who gonna turn around and talk
Mhm.
about this or judge this? And I ain't talking about, oh y'all, margarita before service. I'm talking about immediately after service when I'm done
Mhm.
preaching, going out to eat. I'm gonna need a little mimosa with my brunch. I don't need I don't need to be around people who's gonna make me feel like this is such a major sin. I can't be around this person who will be judging and things of that nature. So
Mhm.
overcoming, I have to admit, I think is a daily thing. I think
Yeah.
it's a daily thing. I don't know if I have achieved it. I think it's a daily thing. I think the very things that I come across so confident in are still the things I wrestle with most.
Mm.
My embodiment, my actual physical body in pulpit. Always concerned about if I'm revealing too much around my attire, if my hair is in an appropriate way, if my
Mhm.
appearance will prevent people from hearing the word I have to say. Coming from
Mhm.
a very traditional church and background, my theology has shifted and changed. To be clear, I'm not saying better or worse, but it has shifted and changed. Will what I have to say be accepted? Whenever I preach at Pentecostal churches, I put a wedding band on, I put a ring on my finger, because I know
Wow.
it helps them receive the word differently. So what do I have to do uh,
Wow.
be accepted for this word to be heard? So I'm not presenting the stumbling block versus changing the culture that still demonizes women's bodies and still makes us feel like this isn't the space for us. It's like I don't have the energy to fight the
Mhm.
culture right now. I have to fix what this is right here to still show
Wow.
up God's word.
And as you were talking, like I just see so many women getting free because I see that woman in that CEO space or that president space of that company feeling the pressure. Do I wear a pantsuit? Do I wear a skirt suit? Do I, shift my hair? Or the woman in the army who can't wear her natural hair and is told to pull it back. So there's so many restrictions as a woman, and particularly as a preacher, as a Christian, because you are called to care and serve and love. Um, you also made a post about a year ago, and you were saying how you had to preach through one of the darkest seasons of your life. What well were you pulling from? What strength and foundation were you standing on? How because there's someone right now that is really ready to throw in the towel, like they just feel it's all hope is gone, and we all feel those days. So what did you pull from, and how can you encourage others to continue to rise through those dark seasons of their lives?
Wow. Christian, thank you so much for this question. And I'm so glad we're here with the risers who know we're here for honest conversations and raw deal conversations.
Yes,
So I am not going to sugarcoat it for, our listeners and you as, my sister who, has carried
absolutely.
me through that dark season. And the
Mm,
truth is, while my season still isn't even dark, it still feels gray. Like I still feel like I haven't seen the full light of coming out of that. And I question, and there, the listeners on the line who have been experiencing grief, I have been questioning recently, will I ever see a full light? Or will this be my new dimmed lens of life? And I have to learn how to appreciate the little bit of light I get or feel and how some days are brighter than other days. So
wow.
the dark seasons, or that, especially at that time, what I was really referring to, everything at the time, at least,
Mm,
I felt like everything in life was just not going well. To onset to kind of what offset everything at that time was you
mm,
all heard a bit about kind of like my parents and my grandmothers raising me. Both my grandmothers passed when I was in high school.
mm,
Devastating as a high schooler. It was my junior year in high school. Um, and Man, if I not if since I'm telling y'all the truth, my junior year in high school was a trying time. When I told you I feel like I was born into some storms and overcoming these storms, and yes, like I said,
Mhm.
always there. Um, you know, it is interesting to see when and how God shows up, or when we
Yeah.
see, I think as we age, we see God differently. And so my junior year in high school, y'all,
Wow.
I was with my grandmothers until I was about 13, and they both thought that my parents had become stable enough for me to go live with them. I've now, had a brother and a sister. Um, and I moved back home with my parents. And I get in the household and discover that my dad um, is an alcoholic. And
Mm.
the death of his mom had become a drug addict as well, but he was always physically and emotionally abusive. And my
Mm.
mom, who wrestles with mental illness. Some at the time had diagnosed her with being bipolar, while others have diagnosed her with multiple personality disorders. She was physically abusive as well, mentally and emotionally. And
Mhm.
while I do not, I want to say, blame the two of them, because I recognize that both mental illness and addiction are illnesses. I do not
Mhm.
make excuses for what they've done. Like it was harmful, particularly to my brother and I. In my junior year of high school, I came home from basketball practice and they had packed up everything, checked out my brother and my sister, and relocated and never told me. So while some would say, wouldn't that be considered the darkest time in your life? It wasn't, because I had a different type of community. I had a basketball team.
Mm.
I had classmates. And quite honestly, for all the Amy Zionites listening out, that's when I became Amy Zion, because I had two
Mm.
best, one whose mom was an Amy Zion pastor, and who knew my family and knew the trauma and the issues, and also knew of both of my grandmothers dying. She stepped in tremendously and moved me into the parsonage to be able to finish high school. And that's how I became Amy Zion. I had an Amy Zion pastor step in beyond pastoring the pulpit, that
Wow.
women do all the time. We do not just pastor in the pulpit, we do the work of mothering, even if we
Mm.
haven't birthed a child. And so Reverend Frances Murray Williams is who came to my rescue and my side. She, along
Wow.
with the auxiliaries of the Amy Zion Church, the missionaries, the Christian educators. So now today, when people say, "I can't believe you still Amy Zion," that's why, y'all. Don't ask me
It
about my traveling experience. Don't ask me about who God is
wow.
connecting me with. I'm still Amy Zion because it was the Amy Zion Church that stepped in when I was a child and had no options, no resources, and who
Mm.
stood by, literally packed up a church van and moved me into college.
Jesus. And this is I am learning so much about my friend. Because one thing about you is like the first time I heard you preach, I'm like, wow, like she is gifted beyond her age, right? And you're so wise, you are so articulate, but it goes back to your origin and your history of the people that influenced you, particularly during a tough time. And so community matters. Community
Absolutely.
matters.
Absolutely. I
So,
mean, yeah. The Amy Zion Church, honestly, y'all heard me. I grew up Baptist and Pentecostal. And this is no tea, no shades to either of those traditions, because Christian Mrs. Aaron, Reverend Mrs. Aaron will tell you, I still function in the Holy Ghost. Okay, we're gonna speak in tongues, we're gonna carry, we're gonna have this
let's
service.
be clear.
But
Mhm.
the Amy Zion Church introduced me to the wedding of education and anointing in a way that I had not
Wow.
been introduced previously.
Mm.
And so I had never met educated preachers who sounded super smart in the pulpit, but still were
Wow.
laying hands. And I was like, oh, we could do both of them. There's no dichotomy. There's no separation. Oh, that's me. I could do it. Um, so,
Wow.
so yeah, so community definitely matters.
That is important. So we had the 16-year-old you that had the church, that had your sports team. Now let's talk about, now I don't want to age you, but the 30-something-year-old you,
Okay, I'm
we
good.
both in our 30s, okay?
Back on track, and
Um,
I'm in my late 30s. Okay, looking at
okay,
40.
you look good.
So
You
yes, that's
look
a 6-year-old me, and some people would say that was the darkest hour. But I can attest now, in this age, for me, the darkest season happened for me November 4th, 2020.
mm,
I had met a couple who, in the Amy Zion Church, a bishop and a supervisor in the Amy Zion Church,
wow.
as I was matriculating through college, and then later when I was in seminary. Because again, I'm gonna go back. It was the Amy Zion Church and the leaders in that community that helped me get through college and also directed me and guided me as I got to seminary. They're
Mhm.
the ones that said, you need to meet Dr. Teresa Fry Brown and you need to meet, like, they were the ones, all these key figures in my life. The people in the AME Zion Church, particularly from the
Wow.
Jersey Conference, who helped guided me, shaped me, put $20 in my hand, chicken sandwiches in
Jesus.
my backpack, all that stuff while I was going to school in DC at Georgetown. I was driving to Jersey, serving every weekend, and they were making sure I was eating during the week.
Wow.
Um, and so I'm talking about all of that. Man, Aaron,
4-hour drive.
I'm talking about help me get me a car. Like, they did all of it for real.
Mhm.
And then I get down to seminary. They connect me with Bishop Lewis Hunter Sr. and Mrs. Ingrid Flack Hunter, who, for those from the DC area, yes, that is Roberta Flack's sister. And they literally embraced me as parents. And for those on this line who are listening, who know you've come from a troubled childhood where people who were called parents didn't necessarily parent you, may have harmed you. What I know is God still sends people who will love you with no strings attached and who will
Mm.
be present for you. And those two people, in what I thought was my adult life, came in like parents in ways that I had never experienced before. And I mean, never. Um, they were spiritually grounded, they were financially stable, they were loving, they were present. They stepped in just miraculous ways, marvelous ways. And so in 2020, when I was in Wiley College, being the dean of chapel, the first dean of chapel, my
Mhm.
godfather got sick, but my godmother had pancreatic cancer. So we knew
Mm.
he was being a caregiver. And to be straight up, this was his second marriage, both of their second marriages, and he cared for his first wife who died of cancer. So we were observing him relive this. And so we thought when he got sick, it was exhaustion. We
Wow.
thought, here he is in his 70s. We assumed this was exhaustion. Let's check on him, make sure he's good. And we later found out that it was COVID. He was admitted into the hospital. He was a Vietnam vet. For those who are like I'm putting this context together for you. And when the physicians called us to tell us that his airways and his breathing passage and everything was shifting and changing, it was going downhill.
Mhm.
It was going downhill. Um, he made a decision not to be placed on a respirator, and that's what put myself, they had three boys, myself and my three godbrothers, that put us on notice. My godfather was the type of man, if he made a decision and had peace with it, there was nothing we could say or do about it. And to
Wow.
help people trace this time, because Aaron, I mean, I called you Aaron. Christian, I know
Yeah.
y'all, I'm a basketball player. I call a lot of people by last name. Know that. Former basketball player. Christian, this will place the time frame for y'all to know when I said talking, preaching through difficult times. Look
Wow.
at you all, just looking at my preaching ministry. I preached a sermon called More Than a Name at Fellowship
Mm.
Chicago. We pre-recorded it for the women's weekend that they were getting ready to have. And a strange time for all of us in the church, right? We were recording to empty rooms.
Mhm.
Went a week before. I recorded that on October 25th and it aired on November 1st. And so there was all this nervousness I had about preaching on this platform and preaching a sermon about rape and assault. What did it look like? What did it mean? Here I was in this space. And it was the last sermon that I
Mm.
reviewed with my godfather while he was alive. And he had a way that while he asked questions and helped me find my theological voice and my preaching voice, when he thought it had hit what it was, he would say, that got some oil on it.
Jesus.
About preaching with dark seasons. I'm saying I stood up to record that sermon, knowing
Jesus.
that he was in the hospital, but had no idea that that would be the last time he and I would ever talk through what it meant to have, like, what it like. I never knew that was my last time talking to him. So it
Wow.
aired November 1st, and I was able to FaceTime him. He wasn't able to speak back, and I was telling him about the sermon. That same weekend, my godmother had been released from the hospital, and she's now in hospice care at home.
Mm.
We are trying to decide what do we need to have at the house then for her to be comfortable, and
Mhm.
for we're still praying,
Yeah.
where it's the matter of you're praying for the best and expecting or preparing for the worst in some ways. And so even
Mm.
though we made that decision, we still were like, well, God is a miracle working God and God can still send him home. And on November
Mm.
4th, God had another plan. And so when he died, while my godmother is at home in hospice care, it changed everything for me. I went back to a house that used to be safety and luxury and all types of things.
Mhm.
My godmother laying flat on her back and having to hear the news that her husband was gone. and what it means to live the rest of her life with pancreatic cancer and hospice care. She actually wound up dying the day after my birthday, January 9th, 2021. So the season of November 2020
Jesus.
to January 2021 was me trying to figure out how to live a life without the parents I have become so reliant on.
Mm,
And them also being leaders in my church. What did it mean to keep returning to a church that reminded me of them? And while I'm being completely transparent with you all, I also was going through hell at my job. While
mm,
college is an amazing HBCU, the students are amazing, but at the time, the leadership was not kind. Again,
mm.
because I was a woman in ministry.
Wow.
And so I was wrestling at work, where for any daddy's girl on the line, at one point it didn't bother me much because all my godfather had to tell me to do was come home, and I would, that's it. I'm quitting this job. I'm good. I'll still have some money in my pocket. We'll figure it out. But now he's
Wow.
gone, and I
Oh
couldn't.
my.
It was a dark season. It was just a very dark season. So much of 2021,
Mm,
me traveling and preaching was me distracting myself from grief and me trying to prove to people that I'm
mm.
okay.
Wow. And what
That's what.
when
Mhm.
when you continue to go, and I don't know what your healing process was. I know for me, I like to get busy. I don't like to sit with my emotions. I started therapy, life changing. What was the moment where you said, okay, I need to either slow down, I need to seek help. I'm not okay. What was that moment like for you?
Good Friday 2021.
Mm,
Good Friday 2021. So you all heard he died in November. I went to Georgia. I spent November, December, January in Georgia trying to make sure my godmother was good. She
wow.
died. And now my godbrothers and I are trying to fix the things at the house. And I know I need to return back to work because this man wants to fire me. And I need to not give him that space. And at this point, my godparents are not here. That safety net is not here. That income is not here. So I need to figure it out. I get back, and while dealing with anger and resentment and just paralyzing grief, that I had not experienced before. When my grandmothers died, I still had my aunts and my uncles and my cousins. We were navigating that together.
Yeah.
But when this happened, I literally felt by myself. It was like, and I felt exposed. I felt like I was on a platform. I felt like people were watching me. Like, it, like they were less. How long before she loses it is what I felt like people were doing. So I kept preaching, I kept pushing, and being the dean of chapel, I had to preach every week for the students, and that seemed fine because it seemed insular. But because we were in a virtual world now, because of the pandemic, everybody was able to watch whatever was going
I was
on.
watching. I was
Yes,
watching. Well, I'm not. I was watching for a word. I text
yes,
you sometime. You preaching this Sunday because I need a word. Wow. But you were saying people were watching just to see what's going to happen or how
yeah,
you.
but I mean, even if they were watching for a word, here I was telling myself, I can't fail. I
Ooh,
can't
the
falter.
pressure.
And so here's, where we talk about like the good and bad that goes with overcoming it, right? The negative part
Uh-huh.
was at some point, y'all, I needed to stop because I was burning myself out. The positive is, I promise y'all, preaching through that pain might have been some of the best sermons I've ever preached in my life because I
Ooh,
told myself, because I had to rely only on God. There was God, you have to do this. I cannot do this. And what I know about God is that God will meet the needs of God's people despite our flaws, our shortcomings, and the fact that at this point, I was
mhm.
only relying on God to do it. I know God delivered what God needed to do. So Good Friday 2021, I had been invited to preach for Jamal Bryant on the Word Network. And I
Oh
did
my
not feel comfortable reneging because I felt like that wasn't a message. She's not
God.
okay. She's been preaching and moving since January and February, and she done buried both of her godparents, and here she is still showing up at the church. And while
Wow.
because there was a change in me, people were like, she's real silent. She's not saying much. She's floating in. She's either present and quiet or really absent. So they were trying to figure out, people walking on eggshells because nobody
Mhm.
was comfortable talking about grief and support and therapy. We have to
Wow.
overcome that stigma in our community, and we'll talk about
We
that.
do.
But we got to
Yeah.
over. There was that stigma, that rhetoric of silence, that you say you're there, but I didn't feel like you were there because nobody's comfortable with speaking about that pain. And so there was the negative parts of it. I was pushing through every day. I mean, I would literally cry my way to the pulpit because I'm like, I don't know what to do or say. And some of
Wow.
these pulpits reminded me of my godparents. Some of these places I preached because they were there, and it was like, wow. But Good Friday, that opportunity where I felt like, okay, this is a national platform. This is going to be on the Word Network.
Mhm.
Everybody's watching. and I have to deliver. And I did, and I wouldn't personally. I thought it was one of my absolute terrible sermons preaching, but I
Mm.
preached it, and I remember being done preaching, sitting in my seat while the rest of the preachers preached, weeping the rest of the service. Dr. Fry Brown, who is, y'all know, people know me as like my auntie mama, who was best friend. Her husband was best friends with my goddad. Like it, this was my
Mhm.
circle. Now it's like no, you know, my best friends were grieving because my godfather had been in their lives. I was like, I didn't. It was some way in ways I didn't know how to escape the grief because it was hitting them too.
Wow.
And so I remember weeping the rest of that service. We got ready to go into the fellowship hall for food afterwards, and I remember looking at, I call her auntie. I remember looking at auntie saying, I, I don't want to be here anymore. I couldn't
Mm.
tell if I meant the place or this world. And
Wow.
she said, we got to pack you up. We got to go. And it was Good Friday where I said, I need somebody else to get me the therapist. I didn't have energy to do the work to do it. So
Wow.
she and my best friend and my village, at this time, Sharika Newton, Reginald Sharp, were the two main ones. Pastor Howard John Wesley were like right here, like covering me. They knew
Mm.
my foot was showing, but covering me enough to help me get my
Jesus.
therapist, get my I got a spiritual director as well. Um, they took me away. I went away for a week to Cancun to just be away from everything.
Wow.
Slept and ate for a week, and then I came back and started intensive therapy. And a lot of people don't like to talk about this. Y'all, it wasn't weekly. Like I had intensive therapy for a month straight. I had to take some time away to be in a facility to see about myself. Brianna Sharp, oh my God,
Oh my
she's the
goodness.
sister that called, like, and she that woman got the Holy Ghost.
Oh
She's the
yeah.
sister that called, she FaceTimed, and I answered by mistake, but I was crying well before all this happened. And she knew. She said, Dominique is like this. This is when she was like, we like, she told her husband, she told the village, we need to see about Dominique. She's like that.
Mhm.
You gotta have somebody who knows, like, we gotta see about it. Or Dominique's gonna have too much pride to admit it. But when she gets to crumbling, y'all, we need to be there because I'm telling y'all I need.
Oh my.
And
Wow. So you I think there's something so powerful that you said. You said you didn't have the strength to call a therapist. So you were vulnerable enough to say, I know my next step, but I don't even have the strength to get me there, which I think is going to be so empowering to someone who's listening. You don't have to do it all. You're saving everybody else. Let someone else come in and help save you, which takes vulnerability. But I want you to walk me through the role therapy played. Um, and I'm a nurse. I'm not too familiar with intensive therapy. I know that's a part of your story, but whether it was a weekly session or whether you needed to go away for a month, how did you decide that that was something that you needed to do? And how did you go all in on that process, being that prolific preacher, being the person traveling, being the go to? How did you posture yourself to receive the help you needed?
So I think one of the telltale signs, man, I'm being super transparent on this line. I think one of the telltale signs for my community at one point was I failed a class during my PhD experience.
Mm,
And ain't nobody ever known me
wow.
to earn, and I mean the word earn anything below a B in
Mm,
life. In life. Um, and nobody wanted to talk about it, but they knew that was a sign. Um,
wow.
Pastor Reginald Sharp, being literally one of my best friend, right? Uh, he knew I didn't have any fresh words anymore. Everything I was doing, I was revisiting old words. For him, that was a sign. Dominique is not. Dominique is the person we talk to and we work through that. She okay, all right, let's work through it. What got me
Mhm,
there was I was so angry with God after my godmother died
mhm,
that I sought all or many various non-traditional religious practices.
mhm.
That I was seeking something,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what it was. And let me also say this. I still practice various different things, whether it's chakra alignment or energy cleansing, um, using aromatherapy. It's because for me, what I started to learn is I deem what is sacred for me. And
Mhm,
I'm not going to allow other person's perspectives to call what I need for my well-being to be witchcraft. This is for me. Um,
mhm,
blessing during that time was that I was living in Louisiana, where access to various
Mhm.
practices was available. And most of the priestess and work practitioners were shocked that I was Christian when I would come in and schedule an energy cleansing bath or different things. And for the Christians who are listening on the line, I pray I'm not challenging you in this way, but I will tell you how I came to peace with it because one, I needed to for me. That's one. But two, there were other ways that I started to connect it to our Christian practices, and not even just Christian practices, African practices as a Black Christian. If you could tell me to eat a saltine cracker and drink ginger ale and lay down, or drink
Mhm.
tea, which is an herb that you're willing to believe functions in such a way, if you can believe in tea and saltine crackers and ginger ale, you know, make it seem like it is medicine. And then when we're sore, we say we're going to take a bath with some Epsom salt and green
Mhm.
alcohol,
Mhm.
you know, all these kind of practices. That helped me create or find a place of peace to say, okay, then why can't I try this ginger root over here, or creating a
Mhm.
bath, creating bath salt kits of different salts, that herbs that mean things. So I spent time February through April, honestly, researching, looking into,
Mhm.
I think it's called Reiki. I got Reiki done, Reiki, however we want to pronounce it, done for me. That
Mhm.
reminded me of practices of laying on hands and all those things. And so I
I'll
made
be
sense of.
honest. I have not, and you're teaching me. I have not done the research, and I know people are. I know when I did my first yoga event, people were telling me how I wasn't a Christian, and I do believe in holistic wellness. I will say I said this year that I wanted to do more research so that I can have a stance on
Mm.
that. However, you've done the research, it works for you, it's a part of your journey. It was a part of your healing. And I thank you for sharing your truth. But I would love to have another conversation with this once I become
Yes.
educated.
And it was, I'm gonna tell you, it was very uncomfortable. You know, I felt like I
Mhm.
was a kid again. I'm like, am I sinning? Am I figuring this out? And then like, God created all of this. I have to find ways of peace. Indigenous people still practice and use stones and colors and dyes, and you know, because they don't have access to the quote unquote sophisticated healthcare systems that we do, and they're living
Mhm.
lifelong. What is it that? So I started doing all this research. Anyway, I
Mhm.
had tons of people who kept saying, "Have you tried therapy? What about grief therapy?" Who were just in my inner circle asking me about it. And I think I had gotten to a place where I was just willing to try anything. And I needed
Mm.
to say, if that's what you believe I need to do, then you need to help me get that resource. And once I said I just can't do it, I'm willing to do it. I can't do it. They came back to me with, they did their research. They came back here some list of therapists
Wow.
with insurance, without insurance. Thank God for a village who has access. They were all like, and if your insurance does not pay, we will help pay for the first 3 months of sessions. We want you to be well.
Wow.
They basically were like, we can't continue to see you like this. And my biggest fear at the time was I thought I would completely unravel and be
Mm.
unable to put it back together again. I was
Wow.
really afraid of that.
And what made you think that? Is it because you've never been there before?
Yes. And I
Okay.
felt like this was I felt like if I cried, if I screamed, because the whole time I was grieving, I was moving, planning the funeral, planning the service, still got to preach, still got to be a professor. So I never gave myself the space to, and I thought if I did, that I just would get to a place that we would be unable to get me there. And as a
Mm.
scholar, most of us, if we're going to be honest, the most sacred muscle you think you have is your memory and your mind. And as we do this work,
Come on.
the memory is the very thing, if we're honest, without the memory, there'd be some ways, some people argue there'd be no trauma because it would be injury. But trauma
Mhm.
is able to be pulled upon or referenced to because of the memory that we have to keep recalling what occurred and not
Wow.
bring back those feelings of sadness connected to said injury.
Mhm.
But memory
Mhm.
also allows us to have the good memories, right? Like the things that we can find joy in. And so I was so afraid that I was going to lose my mind, Christian. I thought the grief was going to get me to a place where I could not function. That if I
Mm.
cried, if I wailed, if I that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my days in a facility.
And was that true? Your mind told you these things because it seems you got out in 30 days, so you weren't there forever.
No, no, I wasn't there forever. I wasn't even there 30 days. You know,
Mm.
we had to create a system that I could do returning back home and things of that nature. So the answer, Christian, I want to say is no, it was not true. But do I still have that fear? Yes.
Yes.
So I
Okay.
work on it every day. I'm still afraid. How much can I cry? Like, how much can I
Mhm.
scream? How much before somebody says that she's no longer, uh, this is no longer acceptable for society? Like,
Mhm.
or not even society, for the church.
Wow.
How
Wow.
long? How much before somebody says we don't need her as a preacher anymore because she's not well?
And you know what? I think that there's that the mm, I think that is a part of the calling of being a preacher. You are so conditioned to serve other people or to continue to show up because you're doing a godly thing, right? You're preaching. This is for God. This is my calling. This is for the kingdom. I'm being a mother. I'm being a friend. I'm being a sister. I am showing up to this nonprofit job I work at because it is good. However, there comes a time where you have to do this introspective reflection of what do I need to continue to do the godly thing, to continue to do the good thing. So I love how you talk about two things. You talk about your community, you talk about your therapist. And I'm also curious to know, you said it's daily. What are you doing daily to overcome? Is it are you really big in reading the word? Do you really, because you're a scholar, so is it reading the Bible? Is it a podcast? Is it quiet time? How do you navigate the daily struggle?
Um, so many ways, a lot
Yeah.
of ways, right? I feel like for those, when we go bowling, how you put those bumpers up so you don't get no gutter ball. I feel like every day I get up to put those bumpers up.
Mm,
Before I go throwing the ball, right? So for me, daily, I'm a person who loves the sun. So it's important for me. I love to wake up to the sun. Obviously, we can't control the sun. So I got this therapy light that starts to
nice.
gives off brightness as if the sun is rising, even on gloomy days. That becomes really helpful. Music is really helpful for me too, and I mean a myriad of music too. I go from Meg Thee Stallion and Beyonce all the way to James Cleveland.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask for hi-fi or lo-fi music that helps with focus. Um,
Mhm.
so various music as I'm getting dressed and moving. I'm also an aromatherapy person too. So mint is a fragrance, although I can never ingest it. I can't stand mint, but mint or citrus fragrances help me kind of wake up and get motivated throughout the day.
Yeah.
So if you go into my office at work, there's a lemon zest fragrance there. If you're here in my apartment, there is a mint diffuser. I'm putting it on
Mhm.
every morning as I start my day. I do start my day with prayers and or affirmations because I believe the affirmations are prayers as well. So I do start my day. I tell myself or speak into the universe aloud what I would like to experience or see or overcome for the day. Um,
Mhm.
I listen to music on my way to the office or a podcast about because I am a nerd, so I am down the podcast, things around theological debates around womanism and
Mhm.
futurism and Afrocentricity. I love all of that, so I listen to that going in. I have learned to enjoy my students. Um,
Mhm.
they are the world is my parish. I'm good old Methodist, right? But my students show me that even in my what I think is a flawed person or body, that I'm needed, and that
Mhm.
they appreciate the gifts that I'm bringing to the space, even when it's not perfect. There are some days in class I'm like, y'all, I think we need 30 minutes. Can we just listen to something? They're like, yeah, before
Wow.
I get into like teaching and lecturing. Or some days I'm coming off the rip and we're talking about the hard stuff. And so I really have learned to appreciate that. Going to church regularly, it took me a while to get back to going to church. It
Mhm.
helped being surrounded, that whole stir up the gifts, listening to preaching. I'm a nerd. I can listen to preaching all day. I don't
Mhm.
care if it's a bad preacher. I can listen to preaching all day because there's something good in something, the
Yeah.
approach, the embodiment, the science, the homiletic of it all. I'm here for it. So listening to preacher all day. Because you all heard who my grandmothers were, I do go back to some old Mahalia Jackson and old throwbacks. Incorporating now, I'm in therapy weekly.
Mhm.
See a physical there like a trainer 2 to 3 times a week so that I remain active physically. And in recent weeks, which sounds so strange, but for those who are in the PhD journeys, because I just finished my comprehensive exams and we
Yes.
know how much tension we carry in our body. There's this organization or group here called the Stretch Lab. Once a week, I go to the Stretch
Mhm.
Lab and it's guided stretches, like wide stretches,
Wow.
uh, help me when I'm finished with them. I realize where I'm holding tension in my body, and I work on that the rest of the weekend. So I tend to go once a week. Now, here's what I have not been doing, because
Good.
that's helpful too. Y'all, I have not traveled and preached since May of 2022. Um, that is very strange for me.
Really?
Correct the
Was
move.
I at one of your last engagements in DC? You were at
Yes,
New Bethel.
yes. Pentecost weekend.
Okay, because my brother came for Philly. I was like, bro, you got to come. And your introduction alone, like just telling the folks good morning, had him slain. He was like, who is this? So was it intentional to
Yes.
just kind of
Mhm.
have self-care break?
Mhm. Yes. It was
Mm,
intentional because I want to return back to the pulpit. Um, I don't want to say strong, but well.
yeah,
And I also recognized that I was going into comprehensive exams, and that required a
absolutely.
different type of attention. One of the things, you being in the healthcare, field, most people don't really talk about how COVID, the pandemic, and/or grief has impacted our cognitive skills. So me, reading for my exams,
Yeah,
comprehending and retaining, I knew would take a different energy. So I needed to focus on that. So that's why I spent the summer doing just that, because I knew I had to
that's
return
so
to it.
good.
So I did that. So now I feel like, okay, I can balance out my energies in a different way so that when I return back to the pool, because again, y'all heard me, I'm Pentecostal. I can't wait for watching right now. So
Listen, okay.
we're at my house, beloved. We got to pray and tarry and get the Holy Ghost ready.
Wow.
So
But
I'm excited about returning back to the pulpit whenever it is. I have nothing on the books right
But that's
now.
powerful, sis. And I don't want you to have to that is powerful because sometimes we feel, well, if I'm not the one doing it, someone else is going to take the spot. Someone else is going to take the spotlight. I'm not going to get engagements anymore. People are going to find out that I saw you are being obedient to the will of God, to the season in your life, and there will always be more opportunities on the other side.
Yeah. Um, if I'm gonna be really honest, y'all, Holy Week for me in 2022 was so amazing for my life and my ministry. Um,
Mm,
I preached Jesus Week, which is Holy Week at Fellowship Chicago, uh, a sermon that I actually really love. And I don't mean like, oh, because it's good preaching. No, no, no. I really appreciate preaching about the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the text in Genesis.
yeah.
And then I also was blessed to have the opportunity to preach at Trinity, UCC for Good Friday.
Mm,
So I feel like I want to return to a pulpit healthy to be able to
mhm.
represent that type of Dominique. I want that Dominique back in the pulpit, and
Wow.
nobody else can do that but me and God. And so, like you said, I think the opportunities will present themselves again. And here's the blessedness that I love about God. And even if they don't, I'm going to be well.
Come on. Thank you, Jesus. You are going to be well. And I think that just your vulnerability, your transparency is going to allow someone else to show up on the job, in their family, in their marriage, in their relationship, in their sibling tribe, whatever, to say, I don't have to have it all together. I need this, and this is my boundary. This is the season I'm in. And then surrounding yourself around people that honor and respect that. That is so key.
Mhm.
That is so key. And so, wow, we are we are almost at an hour, but I have to get to this question because
Okay.
your story is just so amazing. So, for someone who are trying to get who are wanting to get above an obstacle or season in their life,
Mhm.
don't know where to start, maybe don't read the Bible, maybe haven't talked to God in a while, where do they start? Because I do believe that faith in your religion, your spirituality, even through the toughest and darkest seasons of our life, is an anchor, is a foundation.
Yeah.
So for someone who may be a non-believer or backslid or haven't talked to God or just feels so isolated and alone, what can you say to encourage them to just start somewhere?
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's a practice, maybe it's a book of the Bible.
Mhm.
I really want people to not go through their journeys by themselves, and I want them to hold on to the hand of God.
Uh, hmm. I think documenting how they or you listening, I think documenting how you feel and navigate each day will be helpful, either in writing or a video for yourself. Because what's going to happen is you will go back to reread, rewatch, and you will see the changes in you that
Mhm.
it'll be you seeing the difference in you that I think will give you the hope you need each day. Um, it would be easy for me to say, find a friend and talk to them. Some of us don't feel like we have a friend that we can talk to. It's easy for me to tell you, go pray. Now, I absolutely believe in you praying. I actually believe that in you documenting your feeling is a prayer. I feel like, and when you sharing
Mm.
what I'm feeling, and I want to say first, acknowledging in true, like acknowledging all the feelings you have. Um, Me saying I was angry at God and disappointed in God, oh my God, that's so taboo in some spaces. I'm
He
sure my
can
friends,
handle it.
yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
But I mean, being really honest, like whatever it is, I'm disappointed, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I feel this way, acknowledging all of those feelings and then documenting every day. Um, and this is a question that Brianna Sharp gave me to work through seasons. She would ask, what are you looking forward to?
Mm.
And even if the answer was minute, it mattered. So, y'all, there were times where all I could tell her was, I was looking forward to getting my hair done. And I meant that.
Wow.
And she would say, okay, let's direct our joy for that. So I would almost do all I could to make sure my hair appointment was exactly how I wanted it to be, y'all. I'm
Your
here.
hair is always so gorgeous, and you just switch it up, but that's therapeutic for you.
Yes, it is. I is. So I
Mm.
so like this whole style y'all looking at right now, y'all, this was inspired
Mhm.
by Woman King. I found this magazine.
I love that movie. Oh my gosh. Yes, it
But
really
no,
is.
so yeah, so
Mhm.
yeah. Now I will tell you all, for me, music and documentaries help me a lot.
Okay.
Documentaries around Black history help me a lot. As strange as it sounds, when I would see the struggle that some of our ancestors or living legends and people that we respect went through, I would be like,
Mm.
I can do it too. And when I would see
Wow.
the music that Quincy Jones produced after having, I think it was like a tumor they found on his brain, when I would see the
Mhm.
work that after Nina Simone, who struggled with mental health um, um, matters, Toni Morrison or Maya Angelou, and I would look at those documentaries on Hulu or wherever. Somehow
Yes,
they did give me hope, y'all. I can't tell you I always found hope in praying and talking to God.
and
But
that's okay.
honestly, in their journeys, they talked to God somewhere. So it did get to me. It did get to me. But watching those documentaries helped a heck of a lot. And so I would tell you, document your journey for you.
Mm.
I promise you, whenever you get to the other side, and even if you don't get fully to the other side, like I feel today, just progression, not perfection, just by being able to look back and say, that day I was sad for 8 out of 24 hours. Today it's only 4 out of 24 hours, makes all the difference.
Jesus. Thank you, God. That is so powerful. And I'm just honored to be able to talk to you today, Dominique, because like I said, I look up to you. So many people do. And I love your vulnerability. Y'all, she's also really funny. You gonna in her sermons, you're gonna learn and you're gonna laugh. Those are two guaranteed things. But for you to talk about um overcoming the grief or just navigating the grief, setting the boundaries and being vulnerable, I believe is so empowering for someone such as you to just be just so honest. So my last question I love to end is, how can you inspire someone to rise in their vulnerability?
Ooh. You know what I would tell our risers is that your vulnerability is the mode or the vehicle for your rising. I think like
Mm.
your vulnerability is how you will rise. It is the gas in the tank. It is the car itself. It is the vulnerability. When we can overcome the fear of being vulnerable and
Wow.
leaning into our vulnerability, it is in that we will rise.
Ooh, that is good. Oh my gosh, that really touched me. And I know that someone is listening, figuring like they have to have it all together. And through your story, through your inspiration, and through your season, I know without a shadow of a doubt, this is why God allowed us to unite, to film this podcast, to help someone else to rise, to learn, to grow, and to just keep it 100. Like that is so key. So thank you, sister.
For having me.
Yes, 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 yes. y'all, this is probably like my longest podcast ever. It was just so great. And I know somewhere in the future we will align again and we will definitely pick up this conversation and just talk about other things because you have so much knowledge. So thank you to those who have watched and listened to this podcast. Again, we have Reverend Dominique A. Robinson. Please let them know where they can find you online and on social media.
You can visit me on my website, www.dominiquearobinson.com, or on any of the Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I am not a TikTok or Snapchat person, but Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And my handle is Dominique Aisha, Ayesha. So Dominique Aisha.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, y'all. Well, y'all continue to rise. Let's rise in our vulnerability. Let's go out and tackle this world and continue to rise because the world is waiting. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising with Christian podcast. There is someone you know who could be blessed by this episode, so share it with a friend, be a blessing, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. All right, guys, have a wonderful week, and don't forget to rise today because your future is now.